Broadcasting live from the Business Radio X studio in Atlanta, Georgia. It's time for Atlanta Business Radio. Brought to you by Kennesaw State University's Executive MBA program. The accelerated degree program for working professionals looking to advance their career and enhance their leadership skills. And now, here's your host.
Lee Kanter here, another episode of Atlanta Business Radio, and this is going to be a good one. But before we get started, it's important to recognize our sponsor, KSU's Executive MBA program. Without them, we couldn't be sharing these important stories. Today on the show, we have managing partner of Revolution's Rise of the Rest Funds, David Hall. Welcome.
Hi, Lee. Thanks for having me. Great to be here with you. Excited to have this conversation.
Well, I'm excited to learn what you're up to. For folks who aren't familiar, can you share a little bit about your work, Revolution's Rise of the Rest Funds?
Absolutely. Rise of the Rest is a venture capital firm. We're based in Washington, D.C. We're a little unique from most venture capital funds in that our fund only invests in companies that are located outside of San Francisco and the Bay Area, New York City, and Boston, acknowledging that those three ecosystems are pretty self-contained for venture capital, but lots of markets and lots of big ecosystems, cities like Atlanta, like Chicago, like Dallas, like Phoenix, have tons of incredible entrepreneurs and great thinkers, but have a dearth of early stage venture capital. And so we set out to change that through some of the work that we've been doing over the last decade and beyond at Rise of the Rest to really bridge some of those funding gaps for entrepreneurs and startups in those rising cities to help compete against the lion's share of venture capital that goes to those three markets.
Now, you're using the phrase venture capital. When you say early stage venture capital, is that to you a synonym for angel investing?
It's a great question. We fall sort of right immediately following. The world of venture capital encompasses angel investing all the way until late stage, sort of pre-IPO financing. Our sweet spot of venture capital is early stage. We are a seed fund, a seed stage fund, and we typically invest after the angels, but before sort of the larger big venture capital funds come in and take the company public. We are truly what we like to be called as catalytic capital that helps these companies go from their seed stage into their growth stages of investing. So we want to come in after the founder has sort of launched the company, after the proverbial napkin stage where angel investors come in. But once there's a company that's been formed, the founders have left their old jobs and they're fully dedicated to this enterprise, and they're really looking to raise capital to scale the business idea and continue to validate product market fit and the opportunities that they have to serve their customers.
So you're helping them with that kind of escape velocity?
That's exactly right. We like to help them sort of tease out product market fit. We like to work with them on go-to-market strategies. How do they connect with their customers and begin to generate those first couple of sales, which we typically see in most of our portfolio companies. Those initial sales are done by the founders themselves, like they are founder-led sales. And a big testament of our capital is leaning into getting beyond just founder-led sales. How can they recruit more salespeople to come in and help, really scale the business by making sure that all of the revenue is not generated by just one person, for example.
Now, when you're coming in, and especially, Rise of the Rest, assuming means that's the rest of the country, not those three markets that you described. Are there boots on the ground in these markets where you're actually helping them and mentoring them and helping them make connections, or is this just you're giving them money?
So let me go back because I think it's helpful to talk a little bit about more of our origin. And when we started, our founder is the gentleman who was the co-founder of AOL, America Online. And he started Revolution and Rise of the Rest after he exited the AOL Time Warner merge, post the AOL Time Warner merger, and really started to go around the country, having done some work with the Obama administration on jobs and competitiveness. And one of the things that we saw when we were going around to a lot of these communities is there needs to be more of a rallying cry for entrepreneurship. How do you build the next generation of Fortune 1000 companies and make sure that those companies have a lot of geographic diversification, right? We've always known that talent has been evenly dispersed, but the opportunity to build that next great company for the last generation or two has really been concentrated into some of those traditional tech hubs like San Francisco, like New York City, like Boston. And so what we started back in 2012 were these tours, which we called Rise of the Rest bus tours. We would go to cities and we would spend a day there convening with local leadership. We would convene with the big corporations. We would convene with the universities and really present to these folks, often for the first time, that, hey guys, there's a startup culture in your city. It's nascent and small and but growing quickly. And wouldn't it be great for you to capture some of this lightning in a bottle and help support and nurture these startups as they continue to scale and rise so that they don't pick up and, get involved with the Silicon Valley venture capitalists and relocate all of that IP, all of that talent away from a great city like Atlanta and just pocket it into the Bay Area, which is kind of the norm, which has been the norm, which was the norm at the time. And what we saw when we did this is there was this, a big set of aha moments, because we and others who were doing this at the time were really saying, we've got to help keep some of this talent here. We've got to help keep some of this magic here. And so we started doing that. And then the thing that we saw when we were doing it, we came to Atlanta back in 2015 when we were first there on as a part of our Rise of the Rest tour. We met at the Buckhead location of Atlanta Tech Village. And we're really engaged with the community there. And what we've seen over time is that these city leaders, these corporations, these tech folks in the city really got it back then. And they started to invest time, energy, resources into building out an ecosystem that could sustain and support high growth startups. And so it's been a real journey for us, which I'm sure we'll talk more about, but it really did start with this idea that there's got to be a better way of connecting these early stage companies to the capital flows and the additional resources that really young startups, specifically tech-enabled sort of venture-backable startups, which is a little bit different than some of the Main Street businesses, these tech startups, connecting them to the right resources so that those businesses can scale and become big.
So, like you said, you've been doing this from 2015. How have you seen kind of the evolution? Because I don't remember the exact timeline, but there was a period where every startup wanted venture funding, and then it shifted to every startup wanted to be bootstrapped. Where are we now in the evolution of that?
Well, that's a complicated question because of a little technology called AI. But the general evolution of this has been there's a small category of tech-enabled startups that require scaling capital to be able to hire the engineers and the talent and the salespeople well ahead of their ability to generate enough revenue to pay for it, like a traditional business would, right? Traditional business, you invest some of your personal capital, you buy a restaurant or a bakery or a small business, and you generate and you grow off of the sales and cash that business generates. For some of the high growth businesses, the tradition has been go out and raise capital from outside investors, typically venture capital, and you're able to basically fund the losses of those businesses over time in hopes that you'll be able to, catch up and start to have accelerated hyper growth with the revenue and the scaling of the business. Where we sit today, traditional venture capital companies that have built, Uber and Facebook all went out and raised traditional venture capital. You're right in identifying, there have been periods of time in this industry where, where investors in the market wanted to see founders bootstrap. And I think now we're solidly in an era where we're seeing company formation happen so quickly because of, first cloud computing and now AI, that you're seeing, companies get started back again in people's garages, their proverbial garages, and scale quickly through the ability to connect with AI resources that you don't need 15 engineers anymore. You need a really smart couple of engineers that can do a lot more with AI resources. And so I think that we're back to this place of having the need for early stage capital come in and invest in these founders with great ideas, big ideas, but those founders are now able to attach that into and with faster growing businesses, because AI eliminates the need to have, a stable of coders, of engineers building the product.
Now, having traveled around the country and seeing startup scenes all over the place, if you were to build a startup scene from scratch, what are some of the must-have elements?
It's a great question, and I love the idea to sort of to pull out a whiteboard and build a startup ecosystem from scratch. I think the first thing that you need is you need a good university system. Usually is one of the best things that can plant and start these entrepreneurial ecosystems. The Bay Area, having had Stanford and Berkeley and some of those universities, is really the prototype for how do you take the injection of talent, as well as like a risk taking in science, right, in engineering, to try to build things, and then harness that, and then have it be extracted from that university and sort of commercialized in the private markets. You've seen that momentum builder happens a lot, and we see it as one of the first underpinnings of building entrepreneurial ecosystems in places like Detroit, based with the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. Obviously, Austin and UT is a big sort of university-backed ecosystem. The second thing that we see that I think is really helpful is having local leadership acknowledge the need and the desire for having a new generation of startups kind of get born or be born in the backyard of the ecosystem, in the backyard of the city. Um, the 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 push and the help and the pull from local leaders does a really good job of mobilizing resources and helping these young companies kind of have the nursery that they need to survive and be successful. The third thing that's helpful is having an active corporate sector. The more and the larger the corporations that are able to help benefit these companies, and they do it in a couple ways. The first and the easiest way is that they patronize these companies as customers. They become early customers of these startups that become really strong validators of their business model, of the actual business that they're offering. The software that they're providing helps these big corporations do more, better, faster, cheaper, quicker, and that really helps validate the startup. And then the final thing that I would say is a local ecosystem, which would include everything from local media partners, which are incredibly important to help write the narratives of these entrepreneurs and the story and the businesses that they're trying to build, the industries that they're trying to disrupt and improve, are really helpful in making sure that these businesses continue to scale, continue to recruit. And so I think that there's, it's an ecosystem that works really well together when all of these pieces are aligned, and all of these people, all of these different nodes of the ecosystem have a consistent rallying cry to support startups, be welcoming to outsiders, create the work-life opportunity that a lot of the mostly young people who are starting startups and working at startups really enjoy. So making sure that the community is welcoming and exciting. All of those elements work well together to bring a startup ecosystem to life. And if I had to do it all over again. And if I had to if I had my magic wand, those would be some of the elements that I'd bring to bear to create the perfect startup ecosystem.
Now, how is having a path for a wide variety of startup founders, is that a nice to have or a must have? Like, is it okay if we're just focusing in on maybe a certain group of people that are going to a certain university or coming from a certain kind of socioeconomic place in order to take the risk necessary to be a startup founder? Or is it a must have to have a path for, pretty much everybody to get involved in the community?
I think the latter. I think it's a must have to have the broadest, deepest opportunity set out of which the best successes can come, right? I think, history teaches us when we, open up our business opportunities to a diverse set of entrepreneurs who bring their own lived experiences and their own backgrounds and their own challenges that they've overcome to bear. You see really good startup opportunities happen. And there are two places to go with this. The first is just on the startup, on the origination of startups. It works really well when you pair a young, precocious founder with, a been there, done that executive who's seen a couple of business cycles, and you pair those two people together and they're able to learn from each other. One can learn sort of the ways of traditional business. The other can help innovate and find pockets of disruption in the existing industry that need that can be done better with technology. I think the second thing that really helps that is being able to engage the talent and capital sector with the united front, right? And I think that having a diverse pool of both founders and experiences can drive conversations with investors that are local as well as investors that need to come into the market. And I think that having multiple shots on goal, if you were, for success only benefits a city and its ecosystem. To have, if you're a kid that's graduating and thinking about moving to Atlanta to work in with startups and early stage startups, having 2 or 3 or 4 options to go to if one of those startups fails is actually a big reason to choose to relocate for a job in a specific city in an industry, right? You want to be able to say if startup A fails, there's startup B, C, and D that I can go work at. And so the ability to attract and retain high performing talent really is benefited by having a deep bench of innovation, like a true innovation economy and ecosystem alive and well and flourishing to bring that talent to the community.
Right, but it's a chicken and an egg thing. I mean, that's what made Silicon Valley so attractive. If you went there and failed, there'd be 5 other places you can land without having to relocate, where in some markets, especially when they're starting out, you don't have that luxury. There's a handful of stars, and then if they don't work, then you're in trouble. Then you might be forced to move. But I think one of the benefits of Atlanta, and then you would know this better than I would, it's just the diversity of kind of clusters of business and in the economy. So like we have a bunch of people working in little areas so that if you lose a job or the company goes away, there's going to be a place for you in probably 15 to 20 different industries, where a lot of markets don't have that.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think that there are so many really great and positive attributes about the Atlanta ecosystem. And one of the best is the depth and breadth of the opportunities for professional advancement, irrespective of industry, in a city like Atlanta. You've got a deep, great bench of Fortune 100, Fortune 1000 companies that are there. You've got a really easily accessible local transportation system and international transportation system running through the city that make getting places really easy. And I think that those are ingredients that are really big accelerants to being able to drive innovation and access to that innovation into fruition. And I think you're right. I think it's the chicken and the egg issue is often, when we were talking earlier about sort of the key ingredients to making that ecosystem flywheel work. I think that when you look to universities, like I went to Morehouse, so I'm a Atlanta like success story, in that there are 10,000, thousands of kids a year come to Atlanta to go to one of the wonderful Atlanta universities, and it's the job of the business community, it's the job of the ecosystem to keep those students, now residents of Atlanta, there and engaged and fully employed. And I think that you can do that through a lot of the sectors. I mean, Atlanta obviously has one of the best corporate sectors available, with, legendary names and brands that are headquartered there. But there's also this really burgeoning and interesting tech sector that's thriving in Atlanta. And I think that that's one of the big calling cards for the next generation of companies that can be born and thrive in the city.
Right. And I think a key component, and it's not to be discounted, is the folks like a David Cumming and you mentioned Tech Village earlier, he reinvested. He had an exit and reinvested. And the more founders that you have, demonstrating and role modeling, reinvesting in the community and the ecosystem, then that's going to accelerate the growth of the ecosystem.
Yeah, I think that there are so many examples of entrepreneurs who've built really good businesses, and those businesses have gone on to sometimes become great businesses and generate lots of personal and community wealth for the early employees who took big risks at the time to work with folks like a Steve Case in Washington D.C., in the D.C. area with AOL, or people like Dan Gilbert in the Detroit area, Kevin Plank in Baltimore. The stories go on and on of these folks who were very successful, but then came reinvested, and the other folks that they brought with them reinvested in the community to make, to help create this glide path for other entrepreneurs to follow suit. And you're starting to see the benefits of that, again, really start to take hold. I think Dave Cummins is a great example. And if you think of the companies that were founded out of Atlanta Tech Village or had some association with Atlanta Tech Village, and just think about, I call them like the grandchildren of Dave's original vision. There have been dozens of companies that were founded there that all are many of them are staying local and continuing to grow and scale and become part of that foundation layer of a thriving tech ecosystem.
So when Revolution comes to a market and invests in the startups in the market, is that the intention, is to keep the business in the market in order to grow and thrive and become a important part of the ecosystem?
That's our intention, and that's our goal. So we don't enforce it. If a company has a better opportunity to go someplace else, we're investors and we have to kind of abide by that. But our intention and our hope and our expectation is that it's a perfect match of the founder and the team falling in love with the city, and the city falling in love with the company, and there being a mutual embrace. We have this phrase that we use around our place called founder. There's a common phrase in venture capital that's called founder market fit. How does the founder work within the industry that they've chosen, the markets that they're serving, and have a really good fit? We add a third word to that construct called founder market geography fit. And how does it help benefit a founder to be in the geography and the market that they're serving? How does that overlap really be self-reinforcing and make it a more important and stickier fit in building their business? A great example from our portfolio is one of our companies, Hermeus, which is building hypersonic aircraft, and it's based in Atlanta. And you guys know a lot about putting airplanes in the sky in the city of Atlanta, and it's been a great story to pull technology from Georgia Tech, know-how out of some of the airline and aircraft servicing companies that are based in Atlanta, to then learn how to and actually manufacture a plane that's going to be able to fly at, Mach 5 speeds at some point. And like that's a great example of why the founder and market was perfect fit, but then the geography also really helped inform and give unique advantages to what that company is going to be able to achieve, because they're coming to a city that is a global transportation hub. That know-how, that ingenuity, that experience, that the access to the people that have been building planes for 100 years, building and flying planes for 100 years, is based in Atlanta. And now that those resources are accessible to this really small startup relative to some of the big transportation names that are headquartered in Atlanta. This tiny company now can pick up the phone and call some of those people and get the insight, if not hire them or even have them invest in building out the next future of hypersonic flight.
So you've been working in and around the community for 10 years here. What have you taken from it? How are we doing when you kind of benchmark us against some of the other markets that you're in?
Yeah, I'll give you a couple of anecdotes that I think are really exciting. When we first came to Atlanta in 2015 and we're building out sort of the people that we thought we needed to see and meet at the, we called a meeting. We said, hey, we'd love to have everybody come together, and we came together. And to be frankly, at the time, it was a room of all white guys. And we were like, surely in Atlanta, we can find a couple of women and a couple of people of color to help, talk about what the future is of technology and innovation in Atlanta. One of the things that I'm really excited about for the city is when we came back and we're there a couple of weeks ago, and we did the same call for attendance. The room was probably half female. There was there were lots of people of color in the room, lots of African American people in the room, and that was all organic. We didn't have to ask to have a broader table. The ecosystem has evolved such that those people have now come into leadership positions around the Atlanta tech ecosystem. And I think that that's one of the, we talked about making sure that we had the broadest array of minds and thinking and lived experience around the table. It was really great to see that happen organically and not have to be orchestrated, frankly, like it had to be orchestrated back in 2015.
So what are some of the success stories you can share that are coming out of here?
Yeah, I think one of the first is when we were in Atlanta for our Rise of the Rest pitch competition in 2015. There was a young woman, her name Jewel Burke at the time. Jewel Burks at the time won the pitch competition with a company called Part Pick, that was basically using an app to, you take a picture of a part on your phone, and using visual search was able to identify that part. She won that competition and went on to build a business that ultimately was sold to Amazon. And again, to just do the fast forward with somebody like Jewel is now 10 years later, a venture capitalist herself, has gone through the ringer as an entrepreneur, has worked for Google and many big companies, Amazon, and is now on the other side allocating capital back into the startup ecosystem that helps launch her career. I think that that's one of the best personal narratives of success, and how that Atlanta ecosystem was able to support her and her co-founder as they built Part Pick, and now kind of has come full circle, really indicating like the ability to pay it forward and make it successful. Another one of our portfolio companies is a warehouse management company called Stored, that was started by a guy called Sean Henry, really young entrepreneur. And, the business has been able to actively and intuitively navigate some of the worst supply chain and logistics challenges that our country's faced over the last couple of years by using technology and embedding, the next generation of technology in warehouses that are often, when you think about a warehouse, you see people walking around with clipboards, and they're able to put this, they're able to digitize supply chain inventories, so that when a big brand is looking for, 300 TVs, instead of having to, pilfer through a bunch of clipboards, they're able to just key it in, and they know where those TVs are and can get them from the warehouse to the store shelves where they're going to be able to be likely sold. And so we're really excited about the business of Stored. The third company that I would mention is a company called Vision, started by a guy called Kyle Henderson. These guys, the shorthand for Vision is it's tracking numbers for shipping containers. So these big containers that sort of get loaded up in Asia and float across the Pacific Ocean, land in the port of LA, and then have to get either trucked or trained across the country to get to store shelves. Knowing where those containers are, is it in the Panama Canal? Is it held up someplace? Is a really big business and really important for being able to get product from manufacturer, from being finished to store shelves, and being able to have that intelligence that can track that product where it is in the world is a really hard and complicated task that these guys have figured out. These are some of the bright stars that we see in the Atlanta ecosystem and keep us really excited about the future.
So what do you need more of? How can we help?
Well, we need more support. I mean, if you are a corporation in Atlanta, if you run a corporation in Atlanta, I think one of the biggest ways, and I mentioned this earlier, how are you thinking about innovation in your business? Where are you investing your capital into the next generation of startups? If you are an investor and you wanna put some money to work, instead of lean into taking that risk and investing in a startup. It can be a really great experience for investors to partner with early stage entrepreneurs and give them the benefit of your experience. If you're an employee and you're kind of that you can do something better than the way that your company has done it, now is a great time to peel off and build that solution that your company needs. And instead of sort of being an employee, you could be the boss and you can run that company and build that innovation. And all of that can likely be done within the confines of the city of Atlanta. So I guess the quick answer, Lee, is get involved. There are lots of ways to get involved in the technology space, in the startup world, and there's lots of need for experienced, been there, done that executives. There's lots of need for mentorship to help, ease the exit from a corporate employee to being a startup founder. There's always additional need for capital. If you want to invest, if you have capital to invest, there are lots of funds in the Atlanta area that are looking for additional investors to invest in those funds so that the funds can then invest in companies. There's lots of ways to get involved. And I think the biggest answer that we need for cities like Atlanta or other cities and that we think are part of the next generation of rising markets is to get involved, get off of the sidelines and be part of the next generation of great company building that will be the next great the next great names on buildings across the Atlanta skyline are right now being built in somebody's garage or in somebody's accelerator or somebody's dorm room. Make sure that those businesses stay in Atlanta.
And if somebody wants to connect with you or Revolution, what's the website? What's the best way to connect?
Best way to connect with us is our website, www.revolution.com. You can find me on X at dhall3, DHALL, 3, and look forward to connecting with you guys on social or through our website.
Well, David, thank you so much for sharing your story today. You're doing such important work, and we appreciate you.
Thanks a lot, Lee. Really excited.
All right, this is Lee Kanter. We'll see you all next time on Atlanta Business Radio.